All right, so we're going to come back to, I started talking about one, and then I thought, it's going to take a little bit longer than I thought. So here we go. We have y equals 4 times x minus 1 squared minus 64. So a couple things. First of all, does it open up or down? It opens upwards because the chunk that's squared leads off positive. Okay, it's a quadratic equation because the biggest exponent you see is a 2. Okay, you actually also know the vertex if I was asking for the vertex. This is in standard form because you got a chunk squared plus or minus a number. So your vertex in standard form would be positive 1, negative 64. Okay, well, I want to find the x-intercepts. So this is where it gets kind of cluttered. Okay, take your equation, set it equal to 0, and now we're going to solve for x. So again, we have the option of factoring, completing the square root method, or quadratic formula. And when I look at this, I've already got a chunk squared. So that's kind of sort of nudging me towards the square root method, because if I can square root this chunk, then the x will come out. But before I can do that, I got to get rid of the negative 64 and I got to get rid of the 4. So I'm going to add 64 to both sides. So by adding 64, now I got that, okay? Next thing I'm going to do is divide both sides by 4. So I'm trying to get that thing that's being squared by itself. So when I divide both sides by 4, I get 64 divided by 4 is 16. Okay? Now I'm in a position where I've got a chunk squared equals a number. So now I can take the square root of both sides. Anytime during the process of solving a problem that you have to take a square root, don't forget your plus minus. So the x minus 1 pops out, and then the square root of 16 is 4, but I got a positive 4, and I got a negative 4. So I'm one step away from knowing what my x-intercepts are. I just need to get x by itself. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So 1 plus 4 is 5. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. So again, that's not a coordinate. Okay, that's not the coordinate 5 comma negative 3. That's an x-intercept of 5 and an x-intercept of negative 3. So if you were to draw it, here's 5 and here's negative 3. Okay, you would know that he opens upwards. You also know that the vertex is at 1, negative 64. So this is not drawn to scale. But that's essentially what it looks like. Okay, so this would be a negative 3. This would be a 5. And your vertex would be at negative 64. 1 comma negative 64. So the last thing I want to know is, what's my y-intercept? Okay, so that's the last little bit of information that will help me draw this thing without plotting 20 million points. So remember, with a y-intercept, you're going to zero out your x's. Just like with an x-intercept, you zero out your y's. So this would be 5 comma 0, and this would be negative 3 comma 0. Well, for a y-intercept, you would zero out your x's. So literally, come up here and zero out your x's. Everywhere that there's an x, you're going to put 0. And it should be somewhat close to negative 64. Maybe it's negative 63, negative 62, somewhere in there. So what is 0 minus 1? 0 minus 1 is negative 1. Negative 1 times itself is 1. 1 times 4 is 4. So 4 minus 64 is going to give you a y-intercept of negative 60, which would be just a little bit above the vertex because it would swing up from there. So you have 0, negative 60. If it asks you to list it, just put negative 60. If it asks you for the coordinate, you need to put 0, negative 60. Okay, so it's the same information written 2 different ways. All right, let's do another couple. I want to find x and y intercepts. So I have x squared minus 3x plus 1 So I already know a few things, okay? I already know that it's a parabola because my biggest exponent's a 2. I know it opens upwards because I'm leading off positive. Okay, if I wanted to find the vertex, I could. It's going to be a fraction, and we're fixing to get someplace nasty anyway, so I'm just not going to find it this time. Okay, so the question is, find the x-intercepts, find the y-intercepts. So first thing I want to do is see if it's factorable. Are there two numbers that will multiply to 1 that will add up to a -3? And the only factors of 1 are 1 in itself, and 1 in itself will get you 2, but it won't get you -3. So this is not factorable. Okay, now, pause for a second. What does that mean? Do you agree that 13 is prime? Yes, it is, because its only factors are 1 and itself. Okay, but I could tell you that 13 is the same thing as 1/2 times 26. Okay, 13 is the same thing as 6.5 times 2. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways, but they involve fractions and decimals. So what we just figured out is this thing is prime, which means I can still break it down and I can still solve for it more than likely, but it may not be pretty. Okay, it may end up with decimals and fractions. So factoring didn't work. I'm not going to complete the square because this is odd and it's going to send me over into fraction world. I don't want to go there. So my last option is going to be the quadratic formula. Okay, so what is the quadratic formula? X equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And if you have a hard time remembering that, just Google or go to YouTube and type in fun quadratic formula songs and you'll find a bunch. All right, so what are my a's, b's, and c's? My a is 1, my b is -3, my c is 1. Okay, so there's a 1 right here. So negative b is going to be -3, which is 3. Okay, b squared. So -3 times -3 is 9, minus 4 times a times c. So 4 times 1 times 1, all over 2 times a. Okay, so we already know this is going no place good. So I've got 3 plus or minus 4 times 1 times 1 is 4. 9 minus 4 is 5. So I don't know the square root of 5. I can estimate it. It's going to be a little bit more than 2. But I do not want a decimal answer, so I'm going to leave it this way. And then 2 times 1 is 2. So you actually have two answers. One of them is 3 plus the square root of 5 over 2. The other one is 3 minus the square root of 5 over 2. So you do have two x-intercepts. They're just not very pretty. Okay, you could estimate them and you could graph them. They just wouldn't be on a nice pretty little tick mark. Okay. Now, the next part is, I just found my two x-intercepts. And now that I'm reading the instructions, it says that you can put in a decimal if you want to. So just slap that in your calculator. The next thing is, I want to find my y-intercepts. So remember, for x-intercepts, you zero out your y. For y-intercepts, you zero out your x. So that means wherever there's an x, I'm going to put a 0. You can't see. Wherever there's an x, I'm going to put a 0. So my y-intercept is going to be 0 squared minus 3 times 0 plus 1. So 0 minus 0, 0. Plus 1 is 1. So my y-intercept is 1, or you could say your y-intercept is 0, 1. You're either labeling it or you're giving me the coordinate. Either way. Okay, let's try a couple more. I want to know what my vertex is. So I have, oh no. All right. I've got y equals -4x plus 8. What did I just say? X squared minus 4x plus 8. It's going, that is not quadratic. How did I know it wasn't quadratic? Because there was not an exponent of 2 on it. So that was my first clue. So I forgot my x squared. I want to find the vertex and I want to find the axis of the parabola. Okay, and then I'm actually going to graph it. So what I have is this. I have x squared minus 4x plus 8. An easy way to graph a parabola is you can either find the vertex and the x-intercepts, or you can find the vertex and the y-intercept. It just depends on which is easier. Okay, so one of the things that I notice is this is not factorable. So I can complete the square if I want to find my x-intercepts, but I don't want to. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all is find my vertex. Since this is a trinomial, okay, I'm going to find my vertex. I'm going to find the y-intercept. So my vertex is going to look like this, and it's going to be the form of negative b over 2a. So what is negative 4? It's 4. Over 2 times, what's your lead coefficient? 1. So my x coordinate on my vertex is 2, because 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now, if you need to know what your y coordinate is, if you ever need to know your y value, shove your x back into your equation. So 2 squared is 4. Okay, 2 squared is 4 minus 8 plus 8 gives you a 4. Okay, so here's the benefit of drawing pictures. I know that this is a parabola. I know that my vertex is 2, 4. I also know it opens upwards. I also know it opens upwards. Okay, so it looks like this, which means you just answered the question, how many x-intercepts does it have? It doesn't. There are no x-intercepts. Okay, so I don't need to try and find them because I'm not going to find any. Now, that leaves me with, what's my y-intercept? If I ever want to know my y-intercept, 0 out your x's. So that'll give me 0 squared minus 4 times 0 is still 0, plus 8. Okay, so this point right here is 0, 8. So now you've got 2 points where you can graph your parabola. Your vertex is at 2, 4, and your y-intercept is at 0, 8. The final question is going to be, what's the axis of your parabola? In other words, what's your line of symmetry? Okay, so if you fold this thing straight down here, if you fold that straight down there, its little arms will lay on top of itself. So what did it slice through? It sliced through x's of 2. Okay, it sliced through the x-axis, so x must be 2. That is the equation of a vertical line. So you're telling me the axis is x equals 2. If it were to go this way, it would be slicing through the y-axis. So you'd say y equals whatever number. Okay, so let's try one more. And, oh, look, it's word problems. All right. So I have, all right, actually, let me come back and do this one on a final video for word problems.